Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Hive Starter for 10. I'm your host, as always, Ben. And as you would have seen from last week's episode, I'm still joined by Ryan Tahmassebi. Ryan, how's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad, mate. How are you?
And I'm all good, thank you. I'm all
Good.
good. I love doing these, so it's nice to be back with everybody again. So on last week's episode, and if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend you go back and check this one out because you might miss out on a little bit of this week's context if you haven't. We actually talked about the importance of personalizing your surveys and kind of looking at why you would bother kind of in doing that in the first place. So, Ryan, do you want to take us very quickly through that and it just sum that up? Why do we want to personalize our surveys?
Yeah, we just talked about learning more about the individual and kind of moving away from the static traditional demographics of age, gender, length of service to thinking more around things that are unique to different individuals, like whether they've got childcare responsibilities, what their travel looks like into work. And we talked about the way that the pandemic has kind of brought some of that to life a little bit, and how organizations need to continue focusing on and looking at their data in that way, rather than just assuming every millennial, every Gen Y and Gen X are the same. So we talked about how to personalize it and make sure that not only do we look at our data in different ways, that we ask questions that are really relevant to different individuals doing different roles within our organization, rather than making sure that every survey kind of asks the same questions kind of right across the global workforce.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of jump in and kind of pick up on this week's topic, really, because you talked there about different individuals doing different jobs in different departments, right? So it strikes me, therefore, that it would make sense for the modern practitioner to want to include different parts of the organization into that survey design in the first place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something. I think there's something really important about inclusivity. If you think about inclusivity, when you feel that as an individual, it does naturally make you more engaged and more motivated by something. If you feel like you've had a chance to input, and if you think about the traditional survey, which is very much kind of driven out, by HR, it's so often seen as a kind of an HR initiative or an HR project to run an engagement survey or an employee survey once a year, or a couple of times a year, or once every few years, whatever the cadence is. And it's often full of questions that are very much designed at giving the organization a bit of a temperature check as to how people are feeling. And we'll all have seen and maybe even responded to questions in the past, such as how motivated are you to go above and beyond what's required of you? How likely are you to recommend the business as a good place to work? How likely is it that you see yourself still working here in 12 months' time? All of these questions that, when an individual receives them, they know that those questions is for the organization, it's for the employer, rather than it feeling like it's something that's for them. It's an opportunity for them to really open up and express their feelings around their day-to-day work, what's working well, what they're passionate about, the great things that characterize a good day at work for them, but then also the challenges as well. Those are the things that are really personal to people. So organizations need to kind of get the blend of making sure that they ask survey questions that are going to give the organization the data that they need, so that they do have a temperature check of things like engagement across the organization, D&I across the organization. But also they need to be making sure they're asking questions which do give individuals the opportunity to open up about the things which really matter to them. And again, we've seen that happen naturally and organically because of COVID. And then also, if we think about managers as well, we need to make sure that the surveys which we run with our employees give managers something which they feel is relevant to what's happening within their teams. We need to give them insight that they feel is actionable within their teams. So where inclusivity and a more inclusive approach can really help with that is around the design phase. Why not, as practitioners, get together employee groups, get involved in employee forums, get groups of managers together, and start to do some perceptual positioning around understanding, well, as a manager, what do you want and need from an employee survey? As an employee, what are your wants and needs from a survey? What are senior leaders' wants and needs, and what's an HR practitioner's wants and needs? And really open up, explore, put yourselves in the shoes of other types of colleague, and really explore that and make sure that you then craft something off the back of it, which is going to work for everybody. Because if it feels like it's just kind of designed and pulled together in one part of the business, typically HR or OD, then naturally parts of the business are going to feel like that survey's been done to them, it's been done for them, and they haven't had a chance to input. And so naturally you will get an increased likelihood of some resistance once you do close a survey and you start talking about, this is what the data is telling you, this is what the data is saying about a particular manager's team. So the inclusivity up front really then helps both with the participation in the survey itself, but also the energy and the motivation of line managers and employees on the other side to explore what the results are and actually how they can take it forward and drive some action in their teams. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That was great. I mean, and I think it really it does tie into one of the big, I guess, sort of killers of, that ongoing engagement piece and the action off the back of a survey is that, there isn't enough buy-in from sort of different levels of management throughout an organization, because as you said there, they don't necessarily feel like they've participated in the questions, right? So they don't, they haven't been able to drill down into what matters to them, what they themselves are able to affect, right? And so therefore it's going to all fall a little bit flat when the time comes out. You mentioned there, right, like sort of focus groups and things like that being a good way of doing it. Like, if you, I'm not to go into it in too much detail, but is that sort of quite an easy thing to run in your experience? Just get a couple of heads from different departments together and just throw it out there?
Really easy. Imagine, I mean, if you had face to face, you would use flip charts. But if we're talking about tech, using things like Mural, Miro, Jamboard, imagine splitting groups out into 4 areas and asking them to think about, what do you want and need from an employee survey, but put yourselves in the positions of, and group 1 could be the line manager, group 2 could be the employee, group 3 could be HR, OD, and then group 4 could be senior leaders, executives. And you get people to, you put line managers in the shoes of HR, you put HR in the shoes of a senior leader in the shoes of an employee, and actually get them thinking about things from somebody else's perspective. So we can start to actually get people to appreciate what a line manager actually needs from a survey, what they want a survey to give to them. And, that kind of perceptual positioning exercise is really easy to facilitate, but the richness of the output when you get people kind of writing that stuff down and then moving it forward and saying, right, well, how do we craft this? How do we create something that's going to give everybody what they need? And the difference that makes when you then go into actually running a survey and trying to generate really great constructive conversations off the back of it is really tangible. It's really noticeable. So I would really encourage organizations to think about that, because how many times have we run a survey and we've had to really encourage and kind of push managers to try and communicate within their teams, try and get people to respond. And then at the back, we're kind of chasing them month after month. What are you doing within your team? Have you communicated anything yet? What's the action plan? Let's get them more on board and more naturally involved and energized by this from the get-go. And you'll see the difference that makes to them when they feel like they've been a part of it, rather than they feel like it's something that it's been done to them and that something extra is being asked of them. We have to connect them and include them and build that trust from them at the beginning. It makes it so much easier for the rest of the journey. And the same is true with employees and individuals who worry about confidentiality, who worry whether their data is just going to go into a black hole and never actually be listened to, and never actually be actioned. It works for senior leaders who, often just ask us, well, what was the score? What was the response rate? How does it benchmark to last year? How does it benchmark externally? And then the conversation like, next topic, please. We need more from them, but that has to come at the beginning. It's, it's all about getting people more included into it and more bought into it from the get-go, so that it makes the whole process a lot more natural. It makes those conversations happen more organically once the survey closes, and it just makes everything feel a lot easier.
Fantastic. I think that's a great place to leave it for this one for start of a 10. Ryan, thanks very much.
No worries at all, Ben. Cheers.